Hey, Bear and Maya, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks
Doing
for
all
having me.
right.
Good. I'm super stoked about this episode because I don't know, I've been wanting to do this for so long. And it's something I like. I've smoked with both of you virtually at least a couple times, since quarantine started. And but for forever, I've been wanting to do sort of like a 420 astro sesh, something to share with the masses. So really appreciate both of you joining me with this today. I'm kind of excited. I'm excited to light up.
Yes, super
um,
excited to be here.
Yes.
so Bear, if anyone has listened to the show before, you probably heard Bear on it before. This is what your fourth time on
I
the
think this is
show.
my fifth or sixth, actually.
Bear
We're
is
getting
like
up
the
there.
friend of the pod, um, and one of my closest friends. So I will have I'll have you introduce yourself first, Bear, or reintroduce yourself. For anyone who hasn't already heard, I'll just quickly recap. Bear was on the first and third episodes of the show. First episode, Why Astrology, with Ari Felix and Sam Reynolds. Third episode was on the moon with Alice Sparkly Cat. Then you came back to talk about the nodes, I believe, the nodes and eclipses. And then most recently, you came on to talk about the second and eighth houses with Sam Reynolds. So, yeah, four
Yes.
times. This is the
Yep.
fifth.
Yes, this is appearance number five. Glad to be back. Glad to finally be officially a friend of the podcast.
You are always a friend. Um, yeah, why don't you share your SMR? More importantly, what you're smoking on.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, we'll do what you're smoking on. We'll light up together after the intros. How does that
Okay.
sound?
Okay. I'll hold off on
Yeah.
sparking up this day.
Okay.
So I am a Leo sun. I am a sun moon, Aquarius moon, and I'm a Cancer rising. So all about them luminaries. That's my whole life. And I'm smoking on a fine hand rolled joint, no pre rolls. Actually, it's not pre. We do pre roll in this house, but hand rolled this time. A little sour scout, also known as "This Is the Shit" from IC Collective. Um,
Nice.
Spirit and Thundery, Venus smokable. So, temperance and placed in here.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your practice. What do you do in astrology?
I do quite a few things in astrology. So my practice these days is a pretty thorough hybrid of Hellenistic practice. I studied with Chris Brennan and also studied Horary astrology with the School of Traditional Astrology. And then the same kind of, I shouldn't say the same, a modern approach and outlook born out of being a child of the 90s and the early thousands, spending a lot of time on the internet, a little evolutionary astrology mixed in there. So I'm coming with a real focus on synthesizing practices and techniques, and then really bringing in intersectional awareness and analysis into that session. So collaborating with the client to figure out like what their intersection of power, privilege, experience being a person in society is like, and how we can use astrology to figure out the best set of tools, techniques, and coping strategies for just navigating capitalism with as much of a bent towards collective liberation and personal liberation as possible. It's all about grounded growth, embodied empowerment. That's what my practice is about. And I have some announcements at the end of this episode about
Yes,
that
we
practice.
will. We
Ooh.
will definitely have time for some plugs. Awesome. Thank you. And wait, what was I about to say? Whatever. It'll come to me. Uh yeah, it's such a luminary incarnate, I guess you could say. Could you say that? I don't know. Is that a thing?
Mhm, mhm.
It could be a
Very
thing.
shiny. Yeah. Bear was born exactly on a full moon. Um, with a Leo stellium. So yeah,
Wow.
super luminarian. Um, and Bear and I pretty much smoke together every day, like pretty much every day.
It's true. It's true. It's a bit of a
Nice.
ritual.
Virtually, of course, but hopefully very soon in person. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Is you are speaking at NORWAC 2021? Um,
Nice.
yeah, so that's coming up very soon in
Mhm.
about a month. And you're speaking on
We will talk about that at the end.
Okay. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome back. Maya, welcome to the astrology show.
Hello.
So excited to have you.
Yeah, super glad to be here. Big
SMR.
friend turned friend. Yeah. Okay, yeah, SMR. I'm an Aries sun, Gemini moon, Capricorn rising. Yeah, what I'm smoking on right now, a little bit of sour tangerine. And yeah, my practice is based in Hellenistic, also incorporating the modern astrology I'd been learning for a few years before I found Hellenistic and really connected with those techniques and how they worked with my own chart. And so I've been doing readings off and now on again for about a year. And a lot of my practice is just based in learning astrology with other people through using these techniques and really interacting with people how I know them, like as their chart. It's very much a belief of mine that I'm just a translator when it comes to astrology. So everyone who I sit with has their own knowledge of their chart, whether they are aware of it or not. So I just kind of sit down with them and bring that out. And it's an exchange that I love having, as it were.
I love listening to Night Chart folks, like the both of you, talk about how you do astrology because it is so different from my approach. And I just love it. And I love it makes me so just glad that there's so many different approaches out there because I'm so diurnal. I'm so like, let's look into the future. Like, I want to tell you what I see, you know, I'm like, I just want to give you concrete timing and all that shit, which, you know, I do some of that, like, you know, psychological stuff too, but I just love like, you know, night chart, night sun, nocturnal folks. And your approach to readings is always so soul centered and heartfelt. And yeah, I just love hearing different approaches. So, and the way we all know each other. So Bear and I, yada, yada, we met through NORWAC 2019. And we've just been pretty much attached to the hip ever since. We have some nodal synastry.
Angular synastry.
Yeah. Bear's ascendant is on my south node. And yeah, we
Jupiter's on my IC, right?
I think so. Is your IC in Virgo? Yeah. So we have some angular stuff and I don't know. Bear's just like, you're just one of my people. And Maya and I, we met through NORWAC 2020 a year ago. And I just remember seeing you like smoking. I was like, who is that? They're in Philly. Oh, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Our locations. You're in Philly, right, Maya?
Yeah. Yes, I'm in Philly.
Cool. And Bear?
I'm in the Bay Area on unceded Ohlone lands.
And I am in Los Angeles, the lands of the Tongva people. So yeah, basically Maya and I met via like seeing, oh, another Black person with glasses who smokes and is into astrology. We need to be friends. There's not that many of us, okay? I mean, most of us do have glasses for some reason, but
I used to wear glasses. There's photo evidence.
There's some type of trope with like, you know, Black emo kids who are also into astrology. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Oh my God. No, clearly it's a
thing. Well, yeah. And then so Maya and Bear, this is your first time really like talking to each other, right? Because you guys have probably we're already giggling. I haven't even lit up yet.
I mean, I did earlier, but not recently enough. No, we started the session. Please don't. Great.
let's do this. Well, folks, it is currently a week before 420. It's Tuesday, April 13th. It's 5:54 p.m., almost 5:55. Okay, now it's 5:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's not 420 anywhere, but we'll hopefully maybe you're listening to this at 420 on 420. So let's light this up. So I didn't say what I'm smoking on, but I am smoking on a strain called Mimosa, mixed with some Sphere and Sundry, Venus and Taurus smoke blend. Mixed with a little lavender and some CBD too. There's a brand called Pure Beauty that I love, and they have a CBD strand called Terry T, and that's just my shit. I love it. I love that. So, and we're all smoking on joints right now. Mine is particularly long and like, I like to have like my old lady long joints. Bear's holding his up for reference. Yeah, pretty long as well. And you have like a little clip that you're holding yours with, the hair clip.
I've got a little hair clip. It's my go-to for not burning my fingers.
Oh wait, your audio just got quiet.
Oh.
I pushed the wrong button. All right, folks, we're back. Ran into a little tech difficulties. It's all good. We're figuring it out. We're a little stoned at this point. We don't know what we were just talking about before those tech difficulties. But I think we were just talking about how we all know each other. Oh, and that you and Bear had just kind of met for the first time, really.
Right.
Now, today.
Yeah. This very moment.
But we have you're both fire signs with air moons, so I figure we're all going to get along great. Let me relight this long J, baby, and we can get started with 420 Astro. Okay, so I was saying I already said that what I'm smoking on. I always mix my my cannabis with herbs. I almost never smoke straight cannabis unless it's like out of glass, out of a bowl or a bong or whatever. But if I'm smoking a J, I roll it out with some herbs, some type of herbal blend, very often one from Sphere and Sundry, like almost every day, probably. I need to re-up soon. I've gone through 3 tins of the Asclepius smoke blend already.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a goodie.
But
yeah, so I wanted to so the whole reason for doing this, well, I guess what we'll talk about a lot today is like, where do you find things like being a stoner in your birth chart, right? I have some theories around where you'd see this in the chart. And of course, like we're not speaking on any definite terms here. Like if you have this placement, you're definitely a stoner. But I just wanted to kind of open it up because, it's still there's still a little bit of like that's the stigma, but we're in this weird turning point where we're so close to it being at least decriminalized on a federal level, and rescheduled, but hopefully legalized, and it's being legalized in more and more states. And so the stigma is, I think, quickly decreasing. I think it's like 70% of Americans are in favor of legalization. So, but at the same time, you still don't see too many folks like talking about it as much. I think it's so like it's so like commonplace to, you know, talk about, oh yeah, we were having a beer or drinking some wine and talking about this, but you don't hear it so much as, you know, we were smoking a J, you know, taking a walk, you know. So I want to kind of aid in that destigmatization efforts because I don't know, for me, I smoke more than I drink. And we'll talk about like, you know, how what cannabis sort of, you know, why and what ways we use. But yeah, it's a plant that has given it's been very healing for me in a lot of ways. And so and I think that's the case for a lot of people. And why not celebrate on this fine 420 2021. So yeah, where is the stoner in our charts? What do you chalk up to stoner tendencies in your chart? Maya, I love to hear from you.
Oh, me being a stoner definitely comes from being Saturn ruled. I feel my Saturn is also in Pisces. I am of that generation. So I definitely have this relationship with weed where it's something I do daily in my third house. But I have this relationship with it in that the ruler of my third house, Jupiter, is in Scorpio. So it's a very communal thing for me. And it's something that like allows me to access not only that third house, like kind of space where I'm getting into a practice of doing something, or like if I can do something like very high and do it consistently, I know I have that thing like down
Yeah,
pat.
there's like
You know?
the ritual part of like third house and having your chart ruler there in the third house. And yeah, rituals, I get that. And then you were saying the ruler of your third is Jupiter in your 11th house. So that kind of brings in the community part. Awesome. Love that. I can relate to that. But Bear, I want to hear what you chalk up to the stonerness in your chart.
I could definitely see a very similar thing if we look at a quadrant setup. In a couple systems, my luminaries land right on the third, ninth cusps. So I get moon in the ninth, sun in the third. But I personally, so there's some things there, and a domiciled sun in the third in that setup, especially if we use the porch rule. That 5 degrees, if we're thinking about diurnal motion, this is a whole tangent. Then planets haven't actually moved out of that house yet until they got 5 degrees into the next one, so third into the second. Just for anybody who doesn't know what the porch rule is. But for me, I chalk it up to having, you know, from my traditional chart perspective, I have 6 of my 7 planets in a fire sign. The 7th planet is in an air sign. Though I have water angles, my chart is already on fire, so smoking makes sense. And I've got my personal planets combust or are either combust planets under the beams or direct full moon planets. So all of those personal planets are just scorched by the sun. And there's a few other things that we could think about, like Mercury and Mars being co-present in the same sign. I think a lot about just like literally holding something that's on fire. That's the most salient one. On the Saturn point, you know, I've got all that Leo stellium trine Saturn.
And a fire sign.
And
Saturn
a fire sign. Yeah. And even like Kirah in your millennials talk, you talked about, you know, my subgeneration, the Saturn and Sag subgeneration of millennials being the ones who are like, let's go off in the woods and do a bunch of drugs and find ourselves. And I will just say that it sounded a lot like my college years.
Yes.
Love that. Yeah. For me, it's such a Saturn thing, and it's also such a Mars thing for me.
Yeah.
In terms, I have a theory that people with Sun Mars conjunctions have a tendency towards smoking. Obviously not everyone. And the first thing I noticed with this was my grandfather, who was like a lifelong chronic smoker of cigarettes. he's born during an exact Mars conjunction. Sun Mars conjunction. And I have it separating by like 3 degrees, but it's pretty combust. And Mars in its own sign of Scorpio. So I have this very strong out of sect Mars that's just like hot, fiery, like just changed solar phases. It's now a morning star. What are they called? Spear bearers. Yeah. And I think that there's something about the Sun Mars conjunction that just makes it so you need to be close to fire or burn. There's something about there's something about the just needing the intimacy with the act of burning or cutting or severing that comes with being a Martian person. And I think that there's this comfort that comes with the burn of smoking. Honestly, I think it's less about the high when I'm talking about the Sun Mars stuff, and it's more about the smoke. And to smoke it, not to say that all smoking is bad for you, because I don't believe that, but it is like you're burning shit and it's carcinogenic and all that. Like, it's not good to inhale smoke all the time. I'm not going to say it's a good thing. I'm not going to say it's like we're all bad as in like morally bad. But there's that. And I think there's something to having a malefic so closely tied to a luminary, especially the luminary of the sect, and a little bit of like self-destruction a little bit. There's just something there with that happens, especially when we're talking the malefic contrary to the sect, closely conjunct a personal planet. You can get these behaviors where it can feel good to be bad. It's like you kind of need that burn, that fire. And who's to say what's good and bad? Like, what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, those things are kind of arbitrary in this case. Because what's good for me might be terrible for you, and what's great for you might be horrible for me, right?
Spoken like a true malefic person. No, I mean, yes. I full-heartedly agree with that. Something I neglected to mention earlier is that my Aries sun is ruled by Mars at 0 degrees of Aries. So what you speak to in talking about that Sun-Mars connection, I very much relate to. Even in the way I feel like it's interesting, you mention it and talk about it as a day sex person and having that martial energy, but as a night sex person, I feel like for me, when I started actually smoking weed, I remember the first time I smoked weed. I mean, yeah.
Don't we all?
But it was with a friend, and we like smoked out of a fucking Sprite bottle. It was like my freshman year of high school. And it was very much that, a third house experience, or sorry, 11th and third house experience. But yeah, no, just the act of smoking in and of itself being this community, like this, it's not self-destructive purely. It's like there's healing involved in that too.
Yeah.
Is what I'm,
and just like
the point I'm making.
Yeah, community, like connection, literally.
Yes.
Like the smoke being the like air, right? That like correlates to the element of air, or the substance, and how air is what connects us, and smoke takes our thoughts and ideas and our prayers, to the gods too. So there's it's all about connection in so many ways, as when we're talking about doing it socially, especially. But yeah, the Sun Mars piece is definitely the need to burn. And I always say, like, I'm not always smoking to get stoned. Like, I smoke because I'm a smoker and I like to smoke, right?
Yes.
So that's why often I'll smoke CBD, or I'll smoke J's that just are mostly like herbs and CBD, and maybe a little bit of THC, sometimes none. just because I want to smoke something.
Yeah.
Especially during the day when I'm like not trying to be stoned while working. So yeah, there's that. And then there's the Saturn piece. And I wanted to talk to you guys about Saturn in regards to cannabis in particular, because it is an herb that is ruled by Saturn, or a plant, I should say. And some people are very put off by that and confused by that. And I was when I first heard it. But then once I sat with it, I was like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Right.
Yeah.
So for me, I have, as some might have heard, Saturn is the most dignified planet in my chart, in that it's in the house of its joy. It's in its, it's in the daytime, day sect planet, and its diurnal domicile of Aquarius. It's doing pretty well. And it's in my 12th house. And I started smoking every day. Or I got way closer to like weed. Yeah, I started smoking like on the reg, especially in my 12th house year, when Saturn was perfected. And I would say both Saturn years is when I really started getting into smoking. That was also when Neptune entered my first house and got closer and closer to my ascendant. So that correlated. But yeah, the Saturn piece is so interesting. So I fully am like, I believe that Saturn is cannabis is a Saturnian plant. And my reasons, or my idea around that is, well, for one, it is a very drying herb, or plant, I should say. And smoking in general dries you out. It's whether you're looking at it as Saturn or Mars, both malefics are dry, are extremely dry, you could say. And weed has, or cannabis has, this way of kind of drying you out. You get dry mouth, right? Your eyes get dry and itchy. And that's partly because of the smoke, but also I think it just kind of has this way of doing that. So there's that part. And then to me, like, weed just it gives me such a 12th house experience. And that it really and it feels like Saturn and Aquarius, like it feels like an Aquarius side of Saturn, or the diurnal Saturn. In that it really it lifts you up, right? Like you get high, right? So, and what is Aquarius but this fixed air sign, which you can kind of think of hanging out in the atmosphere and hanging out in this high place and having a different perspective on things, being able to sort of pull back, take yourself out of it, especially emotionally. Like when my anxiety is spiking, if I'm starting having some sort of anxiety panic episode, weed will take me and almost ground me in a way, but also it's grounding through the distance, the perspective, and allowing you to sort of remove yourself from the extreme emotionality of things. And it shifts your perspective, which to me is such a Saturn, especially an Aquarian idea. I'm curious about you guys' thoughts on that.
No, I absolutely agree. I very much see the way Saturn is also a planet that sorry, I'm having some very Saturnian weed reactions, being all right, maybe put it down for a second, hitting the brakes. Saturn is very good at telling you when you need to kind of chill and step it back a little bit, which weed often that's what you kind of smoke for, right? Where you're really need to I have to slow my roll. Kind of gets me into thinking I hope people realize in this pandemic, when a lot of us are just smoking weed alone, that the movement of smoking at parties as a fun light, I mean, like it can be a communal thing in like that fun, lighthearted way sometimes, but like I feel like I've hung out in rooms where people like are smoking gravity bongs with each other, and I'm just like, is this really my like communal? Like, because like at
Yeah.
that point you're putting
Don't get
yourself
me
into
started
a
on the
deep
GB.
12th house place. Like,
Don't get me
um,
started on the GB, Maya.
oh God, yeah. But like, I mean, like, I
Ouch.
don't know. That's my Saturn speaking to me about my limits.
Mhm.
But I think weed kind of does that for you in a way. Like, you know, when you smoke too much weed, it has a very distinct way of letting you know when you've done a little bit too much.
Yeah, and it always feels, and not always maybe, but for me, it's like that knowing it tends to be this very Saturnian experience where you're like almost like outside of yourself, right? And it's
Oh
like,
yeah, absolutely.
holy shit, where am I? Gotta locate, gotta, enter the Saturnian labyrinth, locate where the fuck my center is again. Breathe a little
Yeah.
bit, ground center. Yeah, I totally feel that.
It might be my grand trine talking or my Jupiter ruled Saturn. Um, I could somewhat relate. I don't know about this like too much out of body experience they are talking about, but I've heard that people have it. Um,
Yes, it happens. It happens to folks.
um, but for real, on the point of what planet rules cannabis, I've definitely associated Saturn with intoxicants generally, and Saturn, especially like pretty much with that drunkenness, um, or can get the signification of drunkenness. And so looking at like anything that's going to get you intoxicated, inebriated, stoned,
Slow down, basically.
yeah, anything's going
Yeah.
to slow you down. Um, Even like Saturn stones get stoned. But if I understand correctly, I'm not a trained herbalist, but I've rolled with lots and lots of herbalists. Cannabis is also a very lunar plant.
Mm.
That might also be my Saturn ruled moon. So again, I'd be a little more anecdotal than I realized, but I definitely thought about cannabis having that type of feel and vibe. But I think that it gives like, can even think, I was in the medical and legal advocacy side of cannabis when I was much younger, and then was in recreational cannabis briefly, um, which is largely a lot of folks who didn't want to bother with getting medical cards, who didn't feel like they could for one reason or another, and now are now more easily able to access cannabis. At least that's what I found when I was a bud tender. Um, a lot of veterans, a lot of folks who have chronic pain who are finding that it's much um, easier to self-medicate with cannabis than with other heavier narcotics. So it's like the softer side of Saturn in some ways, like you said, like you think about Saturn and Capricorn as being that like heavier, like anything that's gonna like seriously stick at you, really like put you down. Um, Versus cannabis, yeah, having more of that uh, ideally, people talk about head highs, and get nice and clear headed, getting that type of insight, especially I know we're going to talk about Marley here in a little bit. And so like tapping into that space, it's certainly as a musician, finding the right strains that get you the right type of head high where you're just like, okay, music sounds different. The type of melodies I'm able to hear and the way that I'm able to improvise or loosen up, like really does get changed. I feel like that's definitely that Saturn, diurnal Saturn expression of cannabis and smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like my favorite activity to do while stoned um is journal. And that's sort of like my me time. When I love to get stoned and just write to myself and just let my mind kind of like do whatever the fuck, um
Yeah.
because yeah, I feel like it just allows me again to sort of like go to that like sort of 12th house space within me, which is just like, to me, it's just like the inner monologue almost, like, or just that inner space. And I really see Saturn, and with that, the 12th house is sort of like this subconscious framework or building blocks of just like how you move about the world, like what's reality like to you, right?
Right.
In this sort of like subconscious space almost. I don't know if I'm making sense, but hey, we're all stoned, right? So
Right.
so yeah, for me, like weed, cannabis, it's able to take me there where I can just be in, I don't know, this very like me space, and very unabashedly, very like almost like sillily, um, but also, I don't know, I feel like I get some good fucking insight there. I feel like all stoners feel that way, right? Like you get some
Right.
good fucking shit when you're in that space. Um, and I love to like let that flow freely while journaling. Um, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this entering into relationship with the plant, just like you were talking about earlier, like if you smoke a bunch of mugwort, you're going to get mugwort insights. If whatever combination of plant medicine one ingests, you're going to have that connection to that plant medicine, in addition to whatever insights come from having however subtle a head shift or an energy shift, or even just like, one thing that a friend of mine brought to my attention, thinking about the Mercury part, my 12th house is a Gemini, no matter which system you use. So I have this like Mercury 12th, Mercury ruled 12th, and Mercury's there under the beams, co-present by sign with Mars and Venus, and obviously the Sun. And so all those are coming together, and like this big fire trine, so it's just fire all around. Saturn's there. So all these planets that we're talking about having this connection to smoking. And one of the things that I realized is that even if it's, like you said, here is CBD and mostly other herbs, the act of smoking brings the attention and focus to the breath. There's just like this like externalization of it. Not that I'm advocating that one should use cannabis or smoking as like the object of meditation, but it seems to function in a very similar type of way, wherein one can use an object of meditation like a mantra, like visualization, walking, even the breath itself, where one can just do pure awareness meditation. One can simply breathe and engage in awareness practices that way. But it seems like, like you said, entering into the 12th house, this like, for me, very mercurial thing where it was night sect baby over here walking around in the middle of the night, initially as a cigarette smoker, and later substituting that for cannabis, taking long walks at night, thinking and just gesticulating a lot with my hands here, thinking and using the hands as it's like hand to mouth connection with like breath and breathing to really be able to ground. So my thought about it astrologically, I realize not everyone has known my chart, so I do have so much of my chart clustered together that I am having to talk about all the planets at once all the time. So that's the connection there. I know we want to talk about
12th house,
Yeah.
and then also, yeah, so there's like the Saturn piece, there's the 12th house piece that I think is, the 12th house is where we go to escape, whether that is as an escape. It's not always an escape, I should say. It's sometimes just a place there where we have to go to for rest and retreat. It's sometimes a place we go to for escape. It's sometimes a place that we're forced into and we don't want to be in as well, right? So it can take so many different forms. So one of those forms is escape, and escape is not a bad thing, right? There's no moral judgments on escaping. Escaping can be something we need to do, absolutely. And then it can be something that we choose to do. And it can be something that, some of us might have some issues around doing it too much, right? Like kind of continuously escaping things and constantly trying to get away. But whatever that means to you, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, I think there's something about cannabis in particular, like, you know, THC, that allows us, part of the reason why it's so great for things like pain relief. And I think also things like, you know, it can be really bad for anxiety for some people, and then in other ways it can be really good. So also wanted to just preface that none of us are like saying that people, you know, you need to try cannabis. This is like really for people who already smoke cannabis, who already are, you know, using the plant. And, you know, if you're interested, I would say, I don't know. I'm not advocating anyone, you know, go out and try it if you haven't already tried it already. Because it is a plant that can be not great for certain people, particularly people with, like, you know, history of particular mental illness in the family, or, you know, within their own lives. And a whole other reasons, you know, on certain medications, you don't want to be smoking. So I should have said that earlier in the program. But yeah,
also be illegal where you live.
And it also, thank you, Bear. It could also be illegal where you live too. So yeah, this is for folks who are already familiar with the plant, and also for folks who just want to hear us talk stoned about astrology and weed. Yeah. What was I saying? Sorry for the tangent. That happens when I'm high. Oh, I was talking about the 12th house, right?
Yeah, we're talking 12th house and weed.
What's your 12th house, Kirah? What's your 12th house ruler?
So yeah, my 12th house ruler is Saturn. I have Saturn in the 12th. It rules my 11th too. And weed is very, very communal for me as well. And yeah, I just that's what I want to talk about. So escaping. And the fact that, like, I think that there are certain people who just need an everyday. I think actually everyone needs some sort of escape, and we just it looks different for everyone. And it looks the same for some people, and for some people that is cannabis. And that's because it has such positive mental and physical effects. Sorry. That I think people, especially people who you know, have chronic pain issues, and that also extends to lots of people who just like use their bodies for labor purposes also, where, you know, the wear and tear on the body, like cannabis it's sort of like that, like glass, or that can of beer that some people have when they come home from work, or that glass of wine that people have, like that is the joint for a lot of people. And so I think we all have that sort of like 12th house thing. And sometimes it's not about the 12th house, but it just talking about like body stuff, right? We're talking first house. So looking at the condition of the first house ruler, and how that can also speak to this, like, you know, potentially you know, pain, or just the way you're using your body, where there might be chronic stuff. And cannabis is one of those plants, or one of those medicines. Again, we're talking chronic, smoking that chronic, which is chronic is a word associated with Saturn. We're talking Chronos, which is related to the word time, which Saturn is the lord of time. Chronic, Chronos, chronic illnesses is related to Saturn. So yeah, cannabis can be one of those. It's been such an ally to a lot of people with chronic illness, especially that manifests physically. Yeah, sorry, I will stop ranting about this. Take the mic.
Absolutely. That's true for me. I have an autoimmune thyroid disorder, and it just so happens that cannabis is good for almost all symptoms. So, you know, if you want to stay, and my early exposure to cannabis was as a medical patient, back in the days when you did need to be a patient. And I worked with Cannabis Action Network, which is a nonprofit that does medical and legal advocacy. And I was fortunate to be in the Bay Area and to have birthday patients group, one of the first dispensaries, and to be in a state that had medical cannabis long before I started smoking. And so I was able to have legal access, medical access, actually learn which strains are good for what, how, and to get in it on that level at a young age to learn how to use cannabis medicinally. It's still possible to do that, but it is certainly, you've got to find the right bud tenders these days to find somebody who's been around long enough to have been around in the medical days in states where it's legal, you know, here on the West Coast. Now you can go up and down, and every single state has recreational cannabis and at one point had medical system. So you can certainly find those places that used to be medical and now do medical and recreational, just recreational, and learn how to use it that way. But, you know, I've got Saturn in the 6th in a night chart. It is my only bona fide planet, but that doesn't help much. You know, hashtag astrologer good. I have a chronic illness. So using cannabis has been a really big thing for me. Advocating for legalizing cannabis has also been big thing for me. Saturn there, you know, in Sagittarius, and
Hashtag legalize it.
Hashtag legalize it. Yeah, Jupiter there in the 10th, ruling that Saturn. It was my work for a while, because the most dangerous part about cannabis has actually been interfacing with law enforcement. So I won't get us started talking about the war on drugs, but war on drugs, hashtag legalize it, talking about those things, you know, it seems like we might be able to weave in a few of our examples here.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
Can we talk a little bit about Jupiter? Because that's come up a bunch and we haven't really named
we haven't really
it.
touched on that.
Yeah, let's talk about Big Daddy Jupe, because I think there's something there to that as well, especially talking about getting high. Like that's also a Jupiter thing. And it's really like this diurnal like planet situation that speaks to like getting high, you know, and like having this like kind of broader perspective. That is a very like spirit oriented thing a lot of the times. Not to say that cannabis can't be a nocturnal, more soulful or like physical oriented thing too, because I think it can. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jupiter and Jupiter's relationship, because both of you had Jupiter ruled Saturns and you've both mentioned that. So what made you, what are your thoughts around that? I'm curious, Maya.
I mean, maybe I have a bias because I have with my chart being what it is, I think in some quadrant systems this also works out, but I consider Sagittarius to be my 12th house. Sometimes it's Capricorn in other systems, but mostly it's in Sagittarius. So all of our cadent houses, I think as a general, like between you and I, Bear, all of our cadent houses seem to be mutable, which maybe also lends itself to being a part of it, as part of like this aid in, like we were talking about earlier, in slowing ourselves down from that busyness of like doing the mental work, doing the physical labor that we have to do in the world, and in extending that to this conversation about Jupiter, maybe that's the part of Jupiter's contribution to that aspect of weed, of that getting elevated, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, certainly hits for my own chart. Placement and configuration to other planets in my chart makes sense. I've been flipping back and forth where at some point we're going to talk about Snoop Dogg, Erykah Badu, and Bob Marley.
We're going to do that right after this. Yes.
And I'm flipping through and I'm like, interesting. 3 of them have Mars ruled. Mars ruled 12 houses. 2 of them are Sag risings. We got some interesting Jupiter placements going on here as well. I think
Right.
Jupiter, in terms of like the diurnal versus nocturnal thing, like, Jupiter is the nighttime triplicity ruler of fire signs. So there's definitely, and that would be, 6 out of 7 planets in the chart. So I'm a little biased towards Jupiter's nocturnal expression. But yeah, Jupiter, I mean, Jupiter is associated, it's interesting that Saturn gets like this type of like stupefaction association with narcotics and intoxicants and poisons. But then Jupiter gets like this like jubilant, like inebriation. I'm drunk.
Yeah.
So think
Jovial
about it
drunk.
like that. Like there's like, okay, are we medicating against a chronic illness? In which are we using like, RSO, Rick Simpson? Well, we're using these like more heavy, even in some of the strain names, catatonic or critical mass. There's like these strains that are really oriented towards sedating folks because they were bred to help cancer patients and to help
Right.
people who have like severe chronic pain or folks who are
Right.
experiencing epilepsy or tremors, and
Right.
those types of strains are more Saturnian. But then like especially these days, there's strains that are grown to like make, Michael Pollan talks about, flowers are the sex organs of plants. Cannabis flowers are flowers. Female flowers, if you don't, if you want the good stuff, and we literally engineer them to make like their sex organs as big as possible. So there is like
That is
that
so
thing.
true. The growth process is so Jupiterian. Wow.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Wow. And it grows so abundantly too when done in the right conditions.
Even in
Yeah.
not the right conditions, you could just throw seeds
It's a
out and
weed,
anywhere there's,
exactly.
yeah, it really is a weed. It won't
It's a
be
weed.
nice weed, but
Yeah.
It's a weed,
the plant will
yeah.
grow, it will flower.
Love. Oh, cool. I mean, yeah, as a Jupiterian, I just love like it puts me in that nice like Jupiter space of just being like, come in, sit down, take a joint, have a couple of joints. That's me like when I throw 420 parties, which everything willing for 2022, I throw like an epic 420 party.
Yes.
Bring it together.
but um but yeah, when I used to throw them, I would make a bunch of edibles. I would pre-roll just like a ton of weed, and I would put them in cups. So when you come in, you could just like have a joint. Um, yeah, I had fun with it, but basically, yeah, like that brings out my like naturally jovial nature where I'm just like, yeah, I'm like walking around in a robe, like passing around a joint, you get a J, you get a J. Hey, welcome. Do you want to hit? Like take an edible. So I love that.
Sounds like a dream. A
Yeah.
Jupiterian dream.
My home is very, there's literally like like cute vintage ashtrays hanging out everywhere, standing ashtrays. I got this cute one on my desk. Lighters. Yeah. And I have like I have like a fucking volcano vape too. Like I haven't used it in forever. I probably got it like 5 years ago, but I just like it brings out my like, yeah, come hang out. Like let's all get stoned together type of vibe, which I feel like is very Jupiterian. Yeah, so that's my case for Jove.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some famous stoners. I wanted to look at the
Yes.
charts of some famous people who we know as, they're open and loving about their relationship with the plants,
Mhm.
the Zachronic. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about Snoop Dogg first, who has, I believe, a AA rating chart. So Snoop Doggy Dogg, I should have his like Wikipedia up right now so I can like say something about him. Let me look. Snoop Dogg, American rapper. Yes. Okay. So Snoop Dogg, who is a Libra sun, um, is also known as, or maybe he's not really known as this at all, Calvin Cordozar Broadus Jr.,
Yes.
known as Snoop D-O-double-G. He's a rapper, American rapper, and media personality. He was featured on Dr. Dre's debut single Deep Cover, and then his debut solo album The Chronic, and he is a notorious smoker. So and for those not watching the video version, and you want to know his birth info, Snoop Dogg was born on October 20th, 1971 at 6:20 p.m. in Long Beach, California. And that chart brings up a 0 degree Taurus rising chart. On the screen, we're looking at it in whole sign houses. And it puts the sun in Libra at 26 degrees Libra in the 6th house, and the moon at 15 degrees of Scorpio in the 7th house. Venus and Mercury are also in Scorpio at 11 degrees and 5 degrees. And yeah, so just to start off, we're looking at, the first thing I always look at in a chart is the ascendant and its ruler. That's always my go-to. That's always going to be the most descriptive planet in terms of that person and like their identity and like who they are, where their energy is focused. It might not be that way in their public life, right? But it will, at least I'm always going to look to that planet and look to the dignity of that planet, basically. And so we have Snoop Dogg is a fellow detrimental, meaning the ruler of his first house, which is Venus, is in detriment and Scorpio in the 7th house. I say fellow detrimental because that is a condition I have as well. My chart ruler is in the 7th house and in detriment. So anyway, fellow detrimental. And the first thing that makes me think of is like, okay, maybe there's some discomfort in the body, perhaps, right? That's something that that I've seen a lot. I'm not saying that applies to every single person, but just to break it down astrologically, that planet is in a sign that is the sign of its detriment or exile, meaning it's like farthest away from its home or its place of domicile as possible. It's 180 degrees, like completely opposite side of the zodiac. So that environment of that sign is going to be uncomfortable for that planet, because we're kind of talking about things that are the antithesis of that planet. So Scorpio is a sign that is ruled by Mars. And we all know Mars is a planet that has to do with war and violence and things that have to do with cutting and severing and burning. And so Venus, a planet that has a lot to do with uniting things, bringing things together, love, beauty, doesn't really necessarily feel too comfortable in Mars's house. The tools available to Venus and Mars's house are like not tools that Venus really knows how to use that well. And I'm just talking very specific to the experience of a planet in the sign of its detriment. I'm not saying this is about Snoop Dogg or anyone else. It's just, I'm talking very clinically, basically. But basically, to break that down, what I'm trying to break down is that the ruler of the first house represents that person and will also speak to that person's body, as well as their appearance and things like that. If it's in the sign of its detriment, that can speak to perhaps discomfort in the body for some reason, or other sorts of like chronic conditions that speak to, weakness in the body of some way. I don't know about Snoop Dogg and like his weaknesses or anything. or like
Yeah.
any diseases or anything, but we do know his stature, like he's pretty thin person. And yeah, I mean, by thin, I mean like it's not, that's not, there's nothing wrong with being thin, but it's
Right.
just that he sort of has this like, it, he doesn't necessarily have the most like sturdy composition, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like he doesn't look like he's I don't know. I guess when he was younger, he looked probably more healthy, but he's never looked like this, like, like extra like, physically super healthy person. I'm not saying he looks like
Yeah.
sick or anything, but I hope what I'm getting at is that is there.
Yeah, there's, I mean, a couple points on that. I mean, I see what you're saying, like, especially as a Venus rising person, although that's a really early 0 degree
It is
rising.
really
So
early,
a
but
minute,
it's an A
Yeah.
double
minute or
A
two,
rating.
that is double A, that's true.
It's a double A rating, so I'm
Still,
gonna
if
go
they
with it.
rounded it by a minute or two, could be Mars,
They
but
could
either
have.
way,
They could
there's a
have.
lot of air going on there. But I was just thinking about, quote Snoop himself, with so much drama in the LBC, it's kind of hard being Snoop D-O double G, you know.
Hey,
He said it
Right.
himself, and then looking at that seventh house, that Venus is there with Mercury and the moon. He's like, but I somehow, some way keep coming up with funky ass shit like every single day. That moon ruling the third house. But then
yeah.
thinking about
Yes.
all of that Scorpio seventh house, just positive, going over to Mars in the 10th house in Aquarius, Mars ruling the 12th, and knowing a little bit about the conditions that, you know, that whole crew, like rappers from that time period and what was going on in LA during the early 90s. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Venus is over there in Mars territories and it's really hostile,
Mm-hmm.
actually speaking to the hostility of the
Being in your
fallout of the
skin.
war on drugs,
Yeah,
the war on
Right.
poverty and Black and brown people. I don't know how
exactly.
you want to name it, all falling out in whole swaths of the greater LA area, and the way that that's what he's speaking to, making
Literal
his life
discomfort
hard,
in your environment.
Mhm.
And not only that, it's the moon as well in fall in Scorpio and very, very new as well. So doesn't have a lot of light. So there's just a lot of like, yeah, two planets, right, that speak to like discomfort in an environment. Um,
Hmm.
And they're
and
all in the
two
Via
important planets.
Combusta.
Yeah, via combusted too. Yeah, and
Oh.
we're talking sect light for the moon, and then chart ruler for Venus. And of course, this is all speculation too. Like
Mhm.
we haven't talked to
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg about this.
We know that there was a
Yeah.
lot of
Snoop
drama in the
Dogg is not our
LBC,
client.
and it was hard to be Snoop D-O double B.
I mean,
Everybody
yeah,
knows that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
we can infer that from, what he talks about in his music anyway. I mean,
Mhm.
like it is all of that Scorpio stuff is a part of his 10th house. So it's very much something that he's presented in his music and even still presents in like, his talk shows or whatever he's doing with Martha Stewart recently or not so recently.
Yes. I love that. Um, yeah. I'm
do,
just thinking. Sorry, go ahead.
I do find it interesting that Mars is up there. It's the planet that is highest in the chart.
Yes.
He does have the sunset. So we're talking about like one of the few visible or like very visible planets. But the highest planet in his chart,
Mhm.
no pun intended, is Mars. They're in an air sign, and he
Yeah.
is so very public about his smoke.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is. And not he has a lot of air planets, right? He has Saturn. I was going to say Saturn and Gemini, I feel like also speaks to like the chronic smoking, right? With like
Yeah.
the lungs, Gemini ruling the lungs.
Mhm.
Um and that chronic, just smoking that chronic, and then yeah, trine the Mars whole or sorry, sign-based trine with Mars, and then three planets in Libra, his sun And then he also has Pluto in Libra and Uranus in Libra. And then he has this pretty tight Saturn Jupiter opposition, Neptune
Yeah,
sort of in
bringing
the mix
Jupiter
as
back
well.
in.
So yeah, we have Jupiter in Sagittarius at 6 degrees, opposite Saturn, which is retrograde at 5 degrees of Gemini. And Neptune's at 1 degrees of Sagittarius. So we had the Saturn Jupiter opposition, which is interesting because these are like two planets we kind of been talking about too. And to me, that's an interesting opposition, right? Because we're talking about the difference between this, like, these two forces of like contract, expand, like more or less, and maybe having, for me at least with my opposition, it's like difficult to balance, to ever feel kind of balanced in those things, with oppositions. Bear, you might have other things to say about oppositions. But yeah, it's I would just imagine that's with oppositions, there's always that tension, right? And that's a pretty tight one. So it's interesting. And I think it probably speaks to like his lyrical, like, prowess. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
absolutely.
Um yeah, what are your thoughts about it, Maya?
I mean, yeah, I mean, on that in particular, like what I was thinking about earlier is like, it's so interesting that, yes, Snoop Dogg gets to be like, Snoop Dogg is very public about his weed smoking, and it's very much in line with this kind of connection that, the Mars ruled by Saturn and Gemini, ruled by the Mercury and Scorpio, ruled by Mars. And then that Jupiter Saturn opposition in the second and the eighth whole sign, kind of speaks to me about this, his ability to like be bad and like do like illegal quote unquote things. I mean, like weed still isn't federally legal, so we can say illegal in that broader sense. But like doing like, bad shit and like, flouting the law and like testing the boundaries of this social relationship. And the first like record that he put out, not record, but I guess record, whatever. The first record that he put out was Murder Was the Case. So literally also being known firstly and foremostly for a crime in a sense, a flouting of that second eighth house relationship where we owe others something in return to be like a proper member of society or whatever the fuck.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and then that Chiron in the 12th too.
Yeah. Oh. Yep.
Yeah.
Also Mars ruled. Damn. Oh.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Mercury and the Sun are both in the terms of Mars. So all this stuff going back to that Mars.
And then Venus, like ruling the chart, it's like, yeah, that discomfort it's expressed maybe in this very beautiful way. This music, which is, it's beautiful, it's lyrical, it's soulful, it's deep. And it's not like necessarily this like, super Venusian type of music. Like it is so Venusian because it's so like, just thinking about I don't know, just some of his like most popular songs, they're so catchy, they make you just feel good, you vibe, like, so that part's so Venusian. But it's like, yeah, it's this Scorpio, it's this Venus and Scorpio type of way of doing it, where it is kind of this like low key, yeah, I don't know how to describe it really.
Well, not always super low key. We do have to remember that Snoop Dogg was very much a purveyor of pornography in the 90s.
I don't remember that.
And his
Oh,
lyrics, there's
this
some
is
violence
very,
and
very true. This is
misogyny
very
and
well
some
recorded.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
how did I miss this with all the 90s shows I used to watch? Maybe I just blocked it
Oh,
out.
they did not talk about that shit. I mean, like, how could they?
Oh my
Because at
God.
this point, I mean, like, by the point that those shows kind of came on, Snoop Dogg was already kind of becoming like everyone's favorite uncle in a sort of way. But we don't really talk anymore about like the other shit Snoop Doggy
Yeah.
Dogg used to do.
Snoop
Like,
Doggy Dogg.
this man
Yes.
portrayed himself as a pimp. He was essentially a pimp at a
for
time.
sure.
Like, that's
Mhm.
very
Yes.
seventh
Mhm.
house, ruler of the seventh house and detriment type shit, like in the bad way.
Yeah. And that second house, eighth house, Jupiter, Saturn opposition. I feel like that to me feels like this tension between like freedom and confinement as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, like there's that, it being across the second and the eighth. Those are the type of relationships that happen that can happen. And then there's also the sixth house 12th house opposition with like Chiron and Uranus. And I feel like like the sun and fall and then in the sixth house, right, in a night chart can feel very like the need to sort of like project this ego and like pump. Like planets in fall tend to go to an extreme a lot of the times because that's kind of how the environment, like if you're fallen, if you're like in a lower place, imagine you're like falling in a ditch, you have to push yourself up to an extreme just to be seen and heard.
Right.
And so not talking about all Libra suns do this, right? But
but Snoop Dogg definitely did.
Like, exactly.
That's spot on.
Yep.
Yeah, and an aversion to its ruler is in detriment. So yeah, it's the sun is kind of having to do a lot in order to, because the sun is about like being seen. It's about our reputation. It's about our glory, sort of like where our spotlight is. And if it's in such a difficult place, it's the sun has set, right? It might be like kind of pushing itself, inflating itself maybe to an extreme. And in this way, that doesn't mean that like that's who he is, with his kids, but like that's literally what he did. That's the Snoop Doggy Dog that we've seen, and that we've seen it shift through time, but that's Snoop Dogg. That's not Calvin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even just think about like the sun at sunset, like it's pretty flashy and extreme. The sun's light is like, oh yep, it's bright, I can see things.
Change the whole fucking sky
at midday. But when the sun's setting, it's like, I'm gonna get your attention right now.
Yes. Even after it passes the horizon line, it's like you're gonna see that gradient. You're gonna see my lasting effects.
You're gonna miss me when I'm gone.
You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Any last thoughts on Snoop Dogg before we move on? Snoop Doggy Dog. Yeah, I feel like just the sixth house stuff, this like the chronic piece with like the grand trine and air signs. There's a lot there. Cool. That was fun. Next up is the legendary Bob Marley. So we have a B-rated chart. And by the way, what we're talking about when we're talking about the ratings is Rodden ratings. And basically, when you want to get a celebrity's chart, I always use astro.com or Astro Databank. Is that what it's? Astro Dance, Astro Data, they're all the same thing. There's like a million different ways to talk about it, but basically, you can see the rating of like basically the information, and what it rates is like how reliable the information is in terms of the birth data. So,
Mhm.
with Snoop Dogg's, we had a AA rating chart. That probably means it was on a birth certificate, that was like public. But like maybe an A rating would be like, you know, it was submitted, like they had like direct knowledge, someone had direct knowledge, or it was like a mother said it or something like that. So they kind of rate the information they're getting, which is helpful to know, right? When you're looking at the charts of public figures and stuff like that. So about Marley, then the rating goes a AA rating, and then A, B, C. What's up without what's after that?
CBX,
X.
actually in here right now. So A is from the birth record. So it's the Lois Rodden who collected tons and tons and tons of just catalogs of people's
Oh,
information
thank
way
you
back
for
before
that.
computers. Yeah, we owe Lois Rodden's amazing. So AA is from a birth record. A is from memory or a news report. So somebody heard somebody say it and they're like, yes, I heard direct, but it's not Snoop, it's somebody who heard it from Snoop.
Mhm.
B would be from a biography. C is an unknown source or a rectified source. D, conflicting or unverified. X, time unknown. And double X is totally undetermined.
Okay. Yeah. So X would be like we have no time.
Like they don't even know what
Sometimes,
day they're born because there's still people alive today who like don't know what day they were born.
right? Exactly. So anyway, with Bob Marley's, it's a B rated chart. So just keep that in mind. The ascendant could be, you know, it could be in a different part of Sag. It could potentially not even be in Sag, but we're gonna go with this because I think it makes sense, this chart. So Bob Marley was born on February 6th, 1945, which is wild to think about. He was only 5 years younger than my dad. My dad's old.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, this was, yeah, anyway. At 2:30 a.m. is the time given. St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica. And that chart pulls up a chart that is at 14 degrees Sagittarius rising. Jupiter, the ruler of the chart, is at 26 degrees of Virgo in the 10th house. The sun is at 17 degrees of Aquarius in the third house. And the moon is at 27 degrees Scorpio in the 12th house. Initial thoughts, guys, on this chart?
Mm.
And we got that Mars ruled 12th house again.
Yeah.
Mars ruled 12th house. And Mars is at 23 degrees of Capricorn, so exalted in a night chart. Yeah, I think what's the first thing that stands out to me in this chart is, of course, Bob Marley is a fellow detrimental. Um, the ruler of the chart, Jupiter, is in Virgo and retrograde in the 10th house and in the third decan of Virgo, which is a tough decan. So, or maybe that's the second decan. I don't know. But anyway, so again, we bring up the idea of like maybe like the chart ruler being uncomfortable in its environment, and that could perhaps speak to um you know, body stuff, things with physical health, and then also can just speak to, yeah, like the political, like social aspects of just being uncomfortable in your environment, literally, whether that be because of your skin, because of, you know, your body type, what have you. um yeah, so there's that. um that's kind of what stood out to me at first, and yeah, how we talked about like the chronic aspects of that. Speaking of chronic, we have Saturn in Cancer, so Saturn in its detriment in the 8th house in a night chart, so that's a pretty difficult Saturn placement.
Mhm.
um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what else? I mean, and the other thing that stands out a lot to me is the moon, like, yeah, void moon in the 12th house in its fall. And would have been beautiful to see rising on the east at that time, right? It probably would have been nice, big, beautiful quarter moon. But
Yeah.
waning quarter moon, but and Jupiter would have been nice and bright. But yeah, there's there is this sort of like, again, we bring in the 12th house influence of like sort of needing that escape, right? And especially this sort of like void moon, we could think of it as this like wandering moon. Yeah, I don't know, that kind of, to me, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. This person would smoke all the time. Smoke a lot of weed. Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, we have the air sun too. Lots of air in this chart as well.
Right.
Mhm. I mean, thinking
Well,
about, go ahead.
oh no, you go ahead.
I can't, no, I've been talking plenty.
Oh. um I'm just like kind of briefly like zipping through Wikipedia and like thinking about like trying to like get a little bit more familiar with like his perspective on weed in particular.
Mm.
um and yeah, he does consider it like a healing herb and was very much like using it in that sort of, I think, that third house ritualistic way
Mhm.
of it being a medicine that he administers, um, which makes sense with that, very much detrimental, like in detriment, Cancer, Saturn in Cancer,
Yeah.
and then ruled by that moon in Scorpio. It's like all sorts of malefic and like there is pain and struggle there, even with like the exalted Mars ruling all of that.
Yeah,
Almost
because Mars
especially
can't really
with
get that much from Saturn. Saturn can't get that much from the moon. The
right,
moon can get something from Mars, and Mars is still limited.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for bringing up the Wikipedia. Sorry, real quick, Bear. Don't
Mhm.
forget it. I'm just
Oh,
gonna really
okay.
quick. I forgot to kind of like talk about Bob Marley. So yeah, Bob Marley, um, born Robert Nesta Marley, was a Jamaican singer, songwriter, and musician. He was considered one of the pioneers of reggae. His musical career was marked by fusing elements of reggae, ska, rocksteady, as well as his distinctive vocal and songwriting style. That's from Wikipedia. So, yeah, I mean, who doesn't love to smoke weed and listen to Bob Marley? I mean, just these are people who their music is like, you can tell like they have the stoners in mind, like it's just like music that is just so good with weed.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Bear?
Uh, Again, going with the lyrics because we know he felt this way because he said it. Sheriff John Brown always hated me for what I don't know. Every time I plant a seed, he said, kill them before they grow. And I know he does talk quite a bit about. He did talk about cannabis and like repression of the state against cannabis, both as a medicine and cannabis as within like a cultural and religious context. So I feel like you can get like you can see that in some of the like aversions and the tensions in the chart there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then also just thinking about some of the like any patterns showing up where we've got like again we've got a Mars ruled Venus um, in this chart, Mars ruled Moon in this chart,
Mm-hmm.
that
We have a
Mars
lot of
ruled 12. Like
detriments.
there's a lot of detriments also going on. And then thinking about that Saturn piece as like Saturn holding like um, state authority, and just thinking about the eighth house, like the authority of the state showing up in a way that has to do with uh, the way in which one is able to share community resources or interact
Mm.
in that way. And that type of like that showing up, and then also just in some of the music, just like speaking to the shared communal experience of repression and restriction and poverty because of social socio-political conditions at the time. It feels very much like that Saturn in
Yeah.
Cancer.
I feel I see that so much with people, especially who have a lot of planets in detriment or fall. Like the majority of Bob Marley's planets, all except Mars, which is exalted, and Mercury, which is at 1 degree Aquarius. Every other planet is in detriment or fall. So he has Venus in Aries, the Sun in Aquarius. And so I find that folks who have that, a lot of planets in detriment or fall, are just always very keenly aware of the ways that our societal systems fail people, and like how things aren't inclusive enough, because again there's a lot of discomfort within the environment. And it's important to remember that Hellenistic astrology is kind of based on like being within a political system, and
Yes.
your place within a system, within a society. So looking at Bob Marley's chart and just kind of taking it at that value of just like ton of planets in detriment and fall, it's like there's a lot of discomfort there. There's a lot of discomfort within the environment, within the system, and therefore a lot of critiques, right? A lot of pointing out what's not working, because that's the lived experience of a lot of lack, right? And within the environment, and within the life as well.
Right.
Yeah. And again, we have a detrimented sun, which is so interesting. I feel like it shows up in such a different, detriment and fall are different conditions.
Right.
But for Bob Marley, I don't know. I wasn't alive in like the 80s or anything, but it didn't seem like he was someone who was like trying to get a bunch of spotlight and all of that. It was more about the music and the cause. And that speaks to, I feel like, the chart ruler being basically angular on the midheaven, and sort of being seen regardless of if you want that or not. Like, like that's where the chart ruler is. It's the most visible planet in the sky. And it would have been pretty bright too, that Jupiter at the top of the sky. So it's like that, like you're, and maybe, and there's discomfort, right? In that place, because Jupiter is contrary to sect, it's retrograde, it's in detriment. And yeah, it's visible. And so to me, it just seems like it, that's kind of there. He had his identity that was very public, right? But then when you talk about like the sun and sort of like things that were happening underneath that, there's a sun in detriment and a night chart in Aquarius. And I think that is where you get a lot of that like perspective on, society, and these like ideas about what will make society better, like that, those Aquarian ideals. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and I feel like, thinking about Mercury and Mars being ahead of the sun, and therefore like they would be rising before the sun in this chart. So they're carrying along that message of, this is my pain, this is what I have to say about the life that I'm living and the pain that I'm seeing and the people that are hurting around me. And you take that, and you can take that as entertainment, and you can enjoy that, but also, this is my pain that I'm giving to you in this sort of way that I'm presenting to you.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I can see that with like the Scorpio moon rising on the east too. It's like, this is my pain. Here are all my emotions about this in a beautiful musical form. Yeah, it's interesting how like the moon and Venus are both ruled by that exalted Mars. And Mars
Yeah.
is like applying to trine Jupiter too. So there is this little bit of bonification there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that Mars is sort of like it's doing a lot there. And I think
Yeah.
that's like he really was like a fighter, right? Buffalo
Hmm.
Soldier, like, right? Like
Yeah.
he was down for the cause and he was effective as fuck at it.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about Bob Marley now. Like he went down as like, yeah, gosh, Bob Marley.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about Bob Marley before we can move on?
And just like that Mars is also in its own term. So
Mm,
like that Mars
Mm.
is just like so exalted.
nice. Yeah.
And that Mercury is in its own sect, which gives it just like a little teeny bit of help there. But yeah, thinking about Mars is exalt. I've been thinking a lot about exaltation rulers in general. It's like having
Mm.
their own dignity. Like yes, it helps to have the domicile lord be able to see you in like a
Which
more
Mars
direct way,
has.
like which
Mars
Mars
has, which is
has like
helpful.
by sign but not by degree.
Yeah.
So like
Right.
there's a that interesting like askancness, you know. Or we could say, you know, Mars is quickly exiting being able to be seen by Saturn. So it's like wrapping up that show, but like I think Mars has its own power there. And thinking about him using his words so deliberately, specifically to like agitating against Capricorn in a way, like in the ways in which we can associate Capricorn with things that endure for a long time, or like the literal like earth, but like the wintertime fallow earth that precedes the ability to have fertile fields the next year. That like he seemed, particularly in his later years, to be like acutely aware that that's what he was doing, that he was agitating against a state, exalted Mars opposite that like, you know, debilitated Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Hmm.
deliberately agitating against a state in order to leave messages that would like last and in like in impel people towards action.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can look at this chart forever. This Venus Saturn square is potent. It's actually a very potent T square.
Yeah.
Venus in Aries square Saturn in Cancer square Neptune in Libra. Um and then there's like a almost exact Venus Chiron opposition too.
You square the nodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's that right there. We can talk about for forever and
Mhm.
get into his albums.
God, yeah.
But for now we will move on to our Piscean queen, Erykah Badu.
Hey,
Um,
Yes.
yes. So Erykah Badu was born on February 26th, 1971. Who else was born? Wait, who else was born? Was it Snoop? Okay.
71
It
was
was
Snoop,
Snoop.
yeah.
Snoop. Okay. Um, February 26th, 71 at 1:10 a.m. I believe we have a rating for this chart.
Yes.
So pretty close. And I mean the chart speaks for itself, I believe, you know. Um, so Erykah Badu was born at 1:10 a.m. in Dallas, Texas. Yeah, and that produces a chart that is 3 degrees Sagittarius rising. Neptune is at 3 degrees Sagittarius rising on the east. Jupiter is at 5 Sagittarius. Mars is at 21 Sag. So there's a bunch of planets in Sag in the first house. The sun and the moon are in Pisces in the fourth house. The sun's at 7 degrees. The moon is at 19 degrees. So Erykah Badu was born Sounds like her mom was probably in labor during the new moon occurring. She has, yeah, so that's sun, moon, rising, and Lord of the First. She also has Venus in Capricorn at 23 Capricorn. And then Mercury at 29 degrees, 57 minutes Aquarius. So Mercury at the anaretic degree of Aquarius, Saturn in Taurus in the sixth house. So Erykah Badu, born Erykah Abby Wright, known professionally as Erykah Badu, is an American singer, songwriter, record producer, and actress. Influenced by R&B, 1970s soul, and 1980s hip hop, Badu became associated with the neo soul subgenre in the 1990s and 2000s, along with artists such as D'Angelo and Maxwell. So, Miss Badu is, I mean, I love all these artists, but yeah, special love for Erykah Badu. And her chart is just so fucking Jupiterian.
So Jupiterian.
It is
like
so Jupiterian.
to be born with Jupiter in its preferred domicile during a Pisces new moon, my lord.
Rising on the east, like,
yeah. No, like truly beautiful, but also, it's really funny that we kind of like skip around this subject of Neptune being really important in every single one of these charts.
You're right. We have, and it's important in
Which
my
is such
chart.
a
Probably is for
Neptune
you
thing
guys
to do.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Neptune's on my rising too, which is why I also really love Erykah Badu as well. Like
I'm
her music
here for
is
it. I'm here for the glamour. I'm here for the smoke and mirrors. I'm here for
yes.
an experience. Give me a fucking experience, right? And I feel like that's both Jupiter and Neptune. And like when you get them together like this and Sag, you get a fucking experience. It's cool because we're about to have that again very
Yeah.
soon, right? Like Jupiter in and Neptune together in Jupiter's domicile of Pisces, which would be very, very interesting. But yeah, so we got just a whole lot of Jupe, a whole lot of, to me that just speaks to that plus Neptune. It's a whole lot of drama. And have you guys seen her live?
Yes.
No,
Yeah,
I haven't.
On the New Year's Eve show.
It is a fucking experience.
Yes, it is.
It is a goddamn experience, and I am here for that. It's a whole ass show. Yeah. And just Google Erykah Badu and her NPR Tiny Desk concert will come up, and that in itself, it's amazing. I love her performance with Mark, I can never say his last name, Rebillet, Loop Daddy. Loop Daddy, if you ever hear this, call me. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about the chart. We have the Pisces piece to smoking, which we haven't really talked about.
True.
I think that's because Pisces can definitely be stoners, but I think there's something Pisces I find more to be drinkers, honestly, more often than stoners. Pisces are fish. They literally just drink water, right? They can just glug, 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 right? But we know Miss Badu definitely smokes. I'm just thinking of a line, but I'm not going to sing it because it just will sound terrible. So never mind. Just thinking about lines in her songs where she's talking about being stoned. And yeah, she has this Pisces sun and moon, and I feel like there's something about Pisces as a Pisces rising, who her sun is on my rising, so that feels good. That's probably why I love her so much. There is this quality to, again, it's a Jupiterian thing, really, this quality to being stoned that it just I don't know, it feels good to sort of exist on this other plane sometimes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like, I don't know, really know how to explain it that well, but it brings out my more Jupiterian, more Pisces, like more like just flow, just go with it sort of vibe. Um, and allows me to sort of like, yeah, soften a little bit, I think too. Um, yeah, what are you guys' thoughts? Anything about the chart, really?
Hmm. Well, on the subject of, connecting this levity that comes with weed and like this levity of Erykah Badu that exists, let's also get into the Saturn of it all.
Yeah, we can't ignore that, right?
Yeah, because we have this interesting, I think, in that aspect, like symbol theory. This would be like a mini triangle or something, but this sextile between the moon and Saturn and the moon and Venus that are in mutual
Yeah,
reception to each
I
other.
love it.
Um, and having that also kind of translate into where Mars is as like the ruler of the fifth, and like this last kind of like herald of like what planets are like kind of coming up through her rising and through that ascendant around that time and that hour. um like, yeah, just thinking about how like, all of that kind of like shifts into like, if you're like someone who's like putting your emotions into your music, like that's the shoot. And like,
Mm-hmm.
thinking mostly about you know how much he speaks to like that truth to power and that those lessons that you learned the hard way, and then you sing about them so that other people know not to do that same shit you did.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very honest in that way.
That's like so Jupiter too. It's like
Yeah.
I'm gonna teach you lessons,
Yes.
you know, and it's always like these stories, like especially with her lie, like she really wants to like spread knowledge. That's like all it's like what she's all about. She's just like this beacon. I feel like Jupiter and Sag is like not just a megaphone, but like the stadium. Like you have like just the stadium and like, you know, live TV on like cable TV, like, or, you know, whatever channel, ABC, whatever the fuck, you know,
Yeah.
like you have the stage. And you can spread information with that. um I'm obsessed with the Venus Saturn mutual reception.
Yes,
I
I
feel
love
like
her.
that really speaks to how, like, yes, she has all this fiery Jupiter stuff and this watery Jupiter stuff, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
which can become very untethered, but she has this earth mutual reception trine that holds it the fuck down and keeps her so like grounded and so sensual. Not to mention every single planet is below the horizon except her outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So there it was a dark night sky. We would not have seen any planets in the sky. Stars maybe, but no planets. Um except Jupiter rising on the east moments after her birth. So, and then, you know, followed by Mars. So we have this very like, it just reminds me of like, she puts on these spectacular shows. Um, but she has this like entire creative process that's happening like underneath the surface. And like so much of
Oh,
her
yeah.
is underneath the surface, except when she does sort of like, you know, like kind of put it out there in this very as existential way. I'm thinking of her all her like alien like looks and how like the only thing that's above the horizon is her outer planets, which is like probably not even her, which she's like projecting out, right? It's like this like cool like mapping to to the collective consciousness. And she always
Yeah.
feels so like, I don't know, always so futuristic, always so like next wave, but also so soulful and still tied to like the human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
all
think
of those
about
things.
like where those outer planets, like the rulers are Mercury and Saturn for the most part, I believe. Or sorry, Venus and Saturn.
Yeah, Venus and Saturn.
Venus and Mercury. Mercury ruled by Saturn. Or
Yeah.
Mercury being ruled by Saturn, yeah.
So silly. What were you gonna say?
Sorry,
Bear?
what were you gonna?
I'm always thinking song lyrics.
Please do. Please do.
Yes.
I mean, and on. It's funny. She like the first thing she says is like, "I'm feeling happy," right? But like one of the lines that always sticks out to me and makes me laugh. Jupiter rising person. You know, she says, "I was born underwater with $3.06.
Yes.
Oh, you may laugh because you did not do your math." And like even in that song, part of the hook is like, you know, like if your knowledge were your wealth, then it would be well earned. You know, like that, like Lace in all her stuff, she's always talking about dropping knowledge and being futuristic. And like that whole phase with Andre 3000, like that's exactly what she's on, is like some like futuristic space alien, like very much in the tradition. I feel like if not literally musically, then in spirit of like P-Funk and like Mothership Connection. It's just like got that kind of vibe. Like you're on some totally other business.
Yeah.
But thinking about the like, you know, I was born underwater with those like Pisces luminaries in the fourth house.
Yeah.
It makes
with
me
a really
think about
clever Mercury and triplicity, you know, cracking jokes about math and like allusions to drugs. Presumably, is what that is an allusion to, you know, wheat.
Yeah. All the Jupiter stuff, and in particular the Pisces new moon in the fourth house, makes me think about how she's a doula. She's a birth doula. And she still does that. She gives birth to a lot of probably like famous people's kids. And yeah, just that like Pisces new moon with this, you know, Jupiter is a planet that has lots to do with fertility and abundance, um and yeah, the new moon symbolizing birth too, and how she just feels so deeply connected to that process. Also, I feel like planets on the ascendant too speak to birth, right? Like they're being reborn into this hemisphere, and they're kind of becoming known, becoming seen in this way. And so yeah, there's that too, just like the first house planets kind of being reborn, rising on the east. But yeah, I don't know, there's so much Jupiter. It's like, again, like get high, let's expand, let's like look at this in a different way. Let's get to the concepts, the core beliefs. Like, let's boil this down as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool, you guys. That was really fun. I don't look at celebrity charts that often.
Agreed.
Same, yeah.
So this is cool. Just looking at charts with friends, smoking, getting stoned. We should do this more often.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Any last thoughts? Weed, smoking, charts, 420.
The Neptune angle thing is very interesting. It's like it is easy to overlook Neptune and easy to get confused if you want to talk about Neptune.
Absolutely.
But that does seem pretty paramount, just given Neptune's fogginess and penchant for making people forget what they were talking about, even if you don't smoke weed. Just like, even straight edge astrologers do that. So I feel like that seems like a good fit.
True. Yeah. I just want to say, like, I love how 420 usually lines when the sun enters Taurus. And it's like Earth Day also come like I'm like, this is not a coincidence, right? Like
It's absolutely not.
they
It can't
knew
be.
fucking Earth Day was right when Taurus season began. Isn't it when like the sun is at the moon's exaltation degree too? Like, yeah, it's like I don't know, it's a little too astrology. Anyway, like it doesn't convince me that wasn't a bunch of fucking astrologers. Like, anyway, or maybe not. Maybe it's just like that's the way it is because the universe sometimes works that way too, right? It's just
It's
like, yeah, it
true.
just happens to work that way.
Yeah, Thanksgiving's a little bit like that too,
Yeah.
but also debatable as a holiday.
That Valentine's Day is absolutely terrible where it is. It should be in Leo season. Whatever.
I mean, I'm sure all Leos appreciate not having to share birthdays with a holiday.
True, but
That's very true.
I'm sure there are other holidays that are happening in August.
Well, I loved doing this. Thank you guys
Mhm.
so much. Let's tell the people how they can find you. Maya, how can the folks listening find you?
So I am on Instagram right now. I have a website coming soon, but for now, you can find me on Instagram at Night Shift Astrology. That's night shift as in the shift of night.
Yes, not as in like knights
Working
that
late.
ride horses, like night as in
Right.
day and night,
Yes.
nocturnal night.
Yes, Nocturnal Night, and also a very cool song by Susie and the Banshees. Outside of that, I'm on Twitter, where if you want to like, I don't know, e-socialize, you can find me at the Cardinal Center. Cardinal as in Aries.
As in the solstice and equinoxes.
Yes. Sinner as in one who sins. And yeah.
I love the Aries Capricorn, like both have horns, baby, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Both have horns.
Horny
we're
goat
all
weed.
we're all there. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Cool. And you're are you open for readings right now?
I am open for readings right now. I also have, I think at the time that this will be playing, I'll hopefully be on my second successful run. But on my Instagram, if anyone knows, I do weekly playlists. I'm turning that into a weekly show. As a spur of the moment new moon type of deal. And yeah, it'll just be like it's a brief radio show, music and the spheres.
Yes.
And yeah, that should be out by tomorrow.
Cool. We'll have a link. We'll have a link for everything. Music in the spheres. I love that. Who doesn't love a radio show by a great musician?
I'll post the links somewhere on Twitter, send them somewhere where
we'll post them in the show notes here too.
Yes, awesome.
Cool. Bear, let us know how we can find you and what you have going on right now.
You can find me most active on Twitter. My handle is astrolid. Click in
Say
the
it
show
again.
note. Astrolids, like astral as in the astral plane, and IDS like your id, like multiple of them, or like astrology has astrolids. ASTRALIDS, and then I think that one's the underscore, whichever it's a dot or an underscore. You'll have to go into the show notes.
I think Twitter is an underscore,
Twitter's an underscore, Instagram's a dot. Yeah, that's how that one works. But you could more easily find me Patreon/Bear Ryver. Bear, my name like the animal, RYVER. or my website, Psyche and Soul Astrology. There'll be a redirect thrown up soon. My books are opening starting May 1st.
May 1st, 2021.
May 1st, 2021. Books will be opening. Patrons will have like a head start on bookings. And when this episode drops, I will open the link for 4 and only 4 special 420
Ooh.
Astro sessions.
Wait. Everyone listen. So this is a bonus.
This is a bonus special. I'm doing this one day, only on 420.
Only on 420. Only for listeners of the astrology show.
Yes.
So you're a lucky few right now who are listening to this. Some of you may be listening to this, some of the first couple people to hear this. So say it again, Bear.
Okay, so it will be the way that you will find this booking link is to go to, like, I guess you'll have to click on one of my Acuity links and then
or the show notes.
Or the show notes, right, in the show notes. So it's a 420 session. In the show notes, the first 4 people who book this will get to have like a smoke sesh, as in a smoke astrology session. Please be somebody who actually smokes weed. I won't smoke weed if you're not smoking weed. But if you want to just like chill for an hour, roll up, get to talk with an astrologer while you smoke with an astrologer, talk about your chart. It is, of course, a real session. I will be prepared and all of that. But it'll be a totally different type of relaxed and chill session. I do not roll up with anybody ever for a session. So 4 people for 420, it feels like a fun thing to do for myself.
You don't have to say the rate, but is a discounted rate from your regular rate too,
It is
right?
a discounted rate, yeah. It's like $40 off by whatever.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so again, if you're listening to this, there's only 4 available. If you're interested, check out the link below or go to one of Bear's socials and right? Just check out the link below or
check out the link below. I'll leave it only in the show notes.
Okay, only in the show notes.
That way it's just super simple. Yeah.
Exclusive. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear about how these go. It sounds like so much fun. That's such a cool, unique opportunity. Yeah, I mean, it's such a cool opportunity. That's like, you guys should hop the F on it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, those are also the only bookings that are available to people before May 1st.
Before May 1st.
So if you really want one, hop on that. Otherwise, I am what I'm up to right now. I am one of the mentors for AFAN, so I will be starting that. The mentoring program begins tomorrow.
Cool.
I can find out who my mentee is. I'll be speaking at NORWAC. That's happening Memorial Day weekend. I'll be speaking on Sunday, and I'll be talking about astrology in the community. It's going to be a much more like open, loose panel style conversation. I felt like talking about colonization, even if there's some revolution added in there, was a little too heavy for a year plus of the COVID and all the other things. Heavy. After 2020, I felt like we wanted to be nicer to have open conversation. Kirah and I will be talking about what's up with community and astrology and how we bring in intersectional praxis and leaning towards doing things like sliding scale sessions, all that good stuff, how we bring that into our astrological practices. So that's what's up. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to meeting more folks out there as I step full-time into the full-time astrology only world.
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. May 1st. Well, right now, I'll try to get one of those 4 sessions. But if not, Bear's books open May 1st. Your books are open.
Yes.
My books are not open. So book with these 2. They're both amazing. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks for smoking with me. Love it. Thank you for listening, folks. Thank you for smoking with us. If you lit up and while listening to this, we love it. We love to hear it or love to know it. Let us know how you feel about this episode on social media. We post about it at the Astrology Show on Instagram, and I usually tweet about it on my personal at the astrology _. Shout out to Jane Parade. They're not sponsored or anything, but I just am obsessed with this shirt.
Oh, it's
just plant-based, and I'll show you the back too.
Oh, I love that double print. I love that. I love the colors too. Like that orange
Yeah.
is delightful.
To describe it a little bit, it's like a cream colored, kind of like off-white shirt, and then it has this like bright orange, almost like neon orange circle that kind of represents the sun, and then a sort of like a picture of a cannabis plant in front of it. And it's very simple design, and it just says plant-based underneath that in black uppercase font. So yeah, I actually have this in two sizes of the t-shirt and the sweatshirt and a print.
Okay.
And I just, yeah, Jane Parade. I don't know if they ever would ever hear this, but maybe I'll tag them um, or something. I just love them. I love their stuff. Anyway, with that, thank you guys so much. Happy 420.
Happy 420.
I hope everyone's
420.
token up, blaze it, legalize it, smoke it, love it, share it. And with that, yeah, talk to you guys later.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thanks for having me.